Hello, and welcome to the Better Way Challenge. During this video, you will learn about design thinking, how design thinking fits into the Kansans Can redesign process, and how to lead your colleagues through the empathize, define, and ideate stages of design thinking.
Design thinking starts with the empathize stage. During this stage, your school staff will empathize with the customer, who is your students. The data that you learn through this stage will help you to define what the students need from their educational experience.
In the ideate stage, your team will brainstorm solutions to meet these needs. During ideation, nothing is impossible. Nothing's too expensive, too wild, or too crazy.
From the lists of ideas generated, your team will select some ideas to prototype and test. Prototypes are plans, and tests are when your ideas come to life. You try these ideas on a small scale, collect some data for a short period of time, and learn whether or not it is something you should be scaling to all students.
It's okay if the tests fail, because that's the time to pivot, tweak, and try again to learn what works while the stakes are small. Throughout the process, teams collect data, reflect, and iterate to find what works.
Design thinking is not a linear process. At any stage, you might find the need to go backwards, forwards, or anywhere in between. For instance, you might test something that doesn't quite work. So you might go back to your prototype and look for errors. Or you might decide that you didn't quite define the problem clearly enough.
No worries though, once you get the hang of it, design thinking will change the way you approach nearly every challenge in and out of the classroom.
This slide shows that during the designing the rocket phase, you'll focus on the empathize, define, and ideate stages. Then, during the building the rocket phase, you'll move on to prototype and test.
In the Kansans Can redesign process, we have aligned design thinking with the 4 disciplines of execution because plans are only dreams unless they are executed effectively.
The 4 disciplines of execution, or 4DX as we like to call them, are a way for your team to keep track of data on the effectiveness of the execution and keep the work moving at a quick pace. When you define the needs of students, you select wildly important goals and lead measures to implement that will lead to those goals.
When you ideate, you're brainstorming lead measures. These are strategies that will lead you to meet the goals. During the test stage, it's important to keep data, post data, and talk about the data every week. This is done through keeping a compelling scoreboard and creating a weekly cadence of checking on the data and making decisions.
And it's okay if you don't quite get it all right now. You will learn more as you go through this video and have the opportunity to dig in and do it. We are going to take you through one exercise where you can practice the steps in the empathize stage. It's called the Better Way Challenge.
During this challenge, you'll want to get with a partner and come up with an activity where you both feel that there must be a better way. For practice, try to think of something that isn't too big or broad. Think of something annoying but not related to work.
Some examples could be finding the end of a roll of tape, or holding the door open for a large group of strangers who are walking at different speeds but your children are already inside, or teaching your teenager how to drive.
Let's take a look at this video of school redesign teams learning about the Better Way Challenge at regional training.
Non-school related today, the design thinking process. So we're going to do the Better Way Challenge. So think about a time recently where you just thought to yourself, there has got to be a better way. For example, when I was scrubbing for a good 20 minutes, dog slobber off my walls because I have a Mastiff that my husband convinced us to get, and 150 pounds, and he's a great dog, but the slobber he flings from his jowls everywhere is disgusting. And I have to add to my cleaning routine, de-slobbering the walls, the floor, the cabinets, my clothes sometimes. So there has to be a better way, right? Than doing that every week or whenever I have a chance, okay? So think to yourselves, something as silly and meaningless as that, maybe it's something bigger, maybe it has to do with driving. In our group on Wednesday, we had someone who was teaching their child to drive, yikes. Another group was trying to get her children to do chores. So think about to yourself, and maybe you want to grab a partner, and you can kind of do this with that person. Think about something you know there has got to be a better way, and that's going to be the challenge that we're going to tackle in the Better Way Challenge, okay? So partner up. If it's threes, that's fine. Small groups is fine, however you want to do it. But you are going to decide on an activity that you would like to fix. You got 2 minutes to simply pick the activity.
When your selected situation happens, what are you feeling, thinking, saying, and doing? Fill out the empathy map and record your thoughts.
We just went through the first phase, empathize. Now let's look at what it means to define your problem and ideate to come up with solutions.
So we have a problem-solving process. We just empathized and really immersed ourselves. How does it feel? What is it like when we're experiencing this problem? That's the empathizing stage. The next stage, if you turn the page of your packet, the next stage is about defining that problem. Okay? So as a group, as your partners, whatever, you're going to take 3 minutes to identify 2 or 3 of the common trends. What's the biggest problem? And then you're going to list it as a how might we question, right? So top of page 2, look over those empathy maps, identify some common trends, and then you're going to pick one and turn it into a how might we statement. So the example's there, all right? 3 minutes.
Now, look over both of your empathy maps and identify 2 or 3 common trends. Then select one common trend to turn into a how might we statement.
So you started with kind of this vague idea, this vague problem. You empathized, you really immersed yourself in how it feels, you're thinking, all of that jazz. And now, hopefully, you focused a little bit more on the actual problem. You've defined the problem. Any group want to share? What do you got? I want the how might we.
How might we resist the urge to become the Grinch while getting Clark Griswold results on Christmas?
Oh, they are going to drop the mic. Okay. Because you need to hear this. How might we resist the urge to become the Grinch while getting Clark Griswold results on Christmas lights? I don't know that anyone. So we've now really defined the problem. It's one thing to hang Christmas lights, right? It's another to be happy about it and not turn into the Grinch.
To ideate, brainstorm as many solutions as possible to your how might we statement. Be wild, crazy, far-fetched, and frivolous. List your solutions.
When you lead your teams through ideating, review the rules of brainstorming. Be intentional about setting aside a period of time when your team will be in brainstorm mode, when the sole goal is to come up with as many ideas as possible, and when judgment of those ideas will not come into the discussion.
Invest energy into a short period of time, such as 15 or 30 minutes of high engagement. Get in front of a whiteboard or around a table, but take an active posture of standing or sitting upright. Get close together.
Write down clearly what you are brainstorming. Using a how might we statement question is a great way to frame the brainstorm, such as, how might we give each shopper a personal checkout experience?
There are at least 2 ways to capture the ideas of brainstorming. One is called scribe. The scribe legibly and visually captures on the board ideas that team members call out. It's very important to capture every idea, regardless of your own feelings about each idea. The second type is called all in. Each person will write down each of his or her ideas as they come and verbally share it with the group. It's great to do this with Post-it notes so you can write your idea and then stick it on the board.
Follow and nicely enforce the brainstorming rules. They are intended to increase your creative output. Now that you have defined your problem and ideated possible solutions, you are ready to take that idea and turn it into something actionable. It's time to prototype and test.
What do we got? So no one got 10. Did anyone get 8? Oh, they got 10. You guys got 10. Did anyone get 12? Are you still writing? Cheater, cheater, pumpkin eater. All right. Okay. All right. So hopefully you just let your minds go crazy and you weren't evaluating the ideas. You were just getting them all out there. Something we're really going to encourage you to do when we do this for real, right? When you do this back home and when you do it with your school's issues and problems, is there's no crazy solution, right? You can take a crazy idea and bring it down a notch. And your results are going to be a lot better than trying to take these ideas that we always kind of have and ratchet it up, right? So
Out of all your brainstorm solutions, pick the one you both think could be the best solution at this point in time. Not the most exciting or controversial or funny, but one you both think will be the most effective. You could say our most effective solution is blank.
Now take your most effective solution and either draw or write out how it would work in the space below. Be prepared to share your prototype with another set of partners.
Prototyping and testing is a critical component of planning for redesign because it gives schools the chance to try out their ideas on a small scale, collect data, and learn what it might take to implement the idea to scale as a fully developed strategy. These prototypes and tests will not be perfectly implemented, especially if the strategy is brand new and teachers haven't had the professional development to implement it well. But because of the small scale, lessons can be learned quickly and cheaply without committing a large amount of resources. In the next video, the group will plan their prototypes and tests and the data they will collect to determine the effectiveness of their execution.
we now all have a more solid idea that we're ready to test out. Testing is really something we don't do a lot of at schools. We usually jump in head first, and then when it works or it doesn't work, we either keep it going without really deciding if it's working, or we stop it because there was one bad day, right? So that's what we don't want to do with redesign. We really want to have data that supports whether we should keep doing it or whether we should go in a different direction. So we've got 3 minutes on the clock for your group to talk about how would you test whether or not this works? What data could you track to decide if it was working or not? And then how often would you need to check that data to see if it's working, right? Okay, so 3 minutes to really decide how you would test it. How would you decide if it's effective? Go.
If you were going to test the effectiveness of the prototyped solution, how would you do it? What data could you track to determine the effectiveness? How often would you both need to meet to reflect on the data and make adjustments as necessary?
You have just experienced, in a very quick amount of time, the entire design thinking process. So this testing phase that you just planned out, hopefully you'll see how important that is when it comes to your real things you're going to try out. How do we know if it's working? And how often do we need to check in to see if it's working, right? I think we kind of got that process down if we're thinking of intervention and progress monitoring. We kind of got that down for individual students a lot of the time, but we don't do that full scale, and that's what we want to do.
This video is an introduction to design thinking, and practicing the steps in a simplified way will help you when you apply this to your students. As a staff, you'll need to empathize with your students, define goal areas to focus on to meet their needs, and then ideate as many solutions as possible, which should include investigating solutions that other schools around the state and across the nation have implemented, and then select some ideas to prototype and test yourself. These design thinking activities will take place in the Designing the Rocket and Building the Rocket phases of the school redesign plan year.